Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Decaturish.com Twitch Show. I am your host, editor, and publisher Dan Wisenhunt. We have very special guests for you today. We have Derek Mize and Jonathan Gregg. They're a Decatur couple. They are also the parents of little Simone Mize Gregg, and they recently won a lawsuit filed against the Trump administration over their daughter's citizenship. So that's pretty neat. We're going to talk to them about it. Our other guests today are, as always, Hans Utz and George Cheedy. How's everyone doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Our Lord and Savior, Hans Utz. The way this works...
We're in a lot of trouble if that's true.
Yeah, aren't we all? So the way this works is if you've got a question for anybody on our panel, go ahead and create yourself a Twitch account, give us a follow, get in our direct messages, and we'll check the messages every 15 minutes or so and see what you have to say. So, Jonathan and Derek, tell me about this lawsuit. How did you come to be in a legal entanglement with the Trump administration? I've got to hear this from the beginning, so let it go.
Yeah. I have to say that we were not planning on being in a legal entanglement with anyone, much less the Trump administration. Our daughter was born in July 2018. She was carried by a surrogate in England. The surrogate is a dear friend of ours, Johnny. My husband went to university with her, and they've been friends for 20 years. So she was born in July 2018. We're both American. We read the law, which stated really clearly that if a child's born abroad, it's a citizen as long as her parents are married and at least one of them is a citizen. And so we thought, okay, no big deal. There's a lot of laws in the UK that we had to comply with, and so we were really focused on those. And we, worked really hard to comply with all the laws and get on the birth certificate and be Simone's parents and be there, every step of the pregnancy and the birth, so on. So we went to, it was March 2019, and I was getting ready to do our taxes. And it was the first year that we would be able to claim a child as a dependent, right? So I thought, okay, well, she needs the Social Security number, and we haven't gotten that yet. So I went down to the Social Security Administration office, waited around a while, and they said, no, like this isn't going to work. You need a document from the embassy in London. I thought that was a really bad day. I thought, oh, well, now we have to fly to London to get this document. But we decided to make a trip of it.
So wait, you had to fly? They couldn't just fax it, email it to you?
No, you have to go in person to the embassy in London and get this thing called a consular record of birth abroad, right. Which is fair. That's fair. I was upset that we had to go to London, but Johnny's parents are in London, his family's in London. We love London. So we begrudgingly, but somewhat happily made the trip. And we walked into the State Department, and we had prepared pretty thoroughly. We brought everything that, one would need, according to all the guidance on the internet and the documents. And they really weren't concerned with any of it. Their first question was, which one of you is the real father? And we had faced questions like that before,
Were you talking to Maury Povich, or was this?
It did kind of feel like that. This person at the window, I was like, it got really bad. It got worse. It got more tense. And at some point, I was like, is this your job? And she's like, I'm from Sweden. So yeah, this is the job I got, and this is what I got to do. So she asked a bunch of questions, basically just trying to get at which one of us is, the real father. And long story short, they took a lot of time and a lot of evidence to sit us down and eventually let us know that according to a policy that's not law, but just a policy that they have internally, a child that's born to two men is not a child they consider born in wedlock. So according to them, she was born out of wedlock. They don't know who, they think the other parents are, but she's just born out of wedlock. And according to the laws for children born out of wedlock, she's not a citizen, and good luck, getting home.
So, but you were legally married within the United States, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah, Johnny and I married in 2015 in New York.
And that was after the Supreme Court ruling, correct? Or before?
Just before.
It was just before.
Right.
Marriage was legal, before Obergefell and the Supreme Court decision. There were many states that made it legal, and then New York was one of them. And so we were married a few weeks before the Supreme Court decided, no matter what your state says, it's legal everywhere.
Gotcha.
But absolutely legal marriage.
Just so that everybody listening is 100% clear on the way that the law works, when you are in a U.S. embassy having a conversation with individuals anywhere in the world, you are on American soil, subject to American laws. It's not like you were subject to some different set of laws because you were in the UK. You were subject to American laws on American soil, having a conversation with people that were representing the American government.
Yeah.
Legally married in the eyes of American law, having this conversation.
Yeah.
So
essentially, at the embassy in London, there's all sorts of people coming to get their children passport. There's all sorts of people who are American and are living in London, either because they work for a company that sent them there, or they're military, or maybe they're just rich and they're there. I don't know, but there's tons and tons of. Johnny can tell you, there's a lot of Americans in England.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Americans having children in England while they're in England, and they go to the embassy. And we were there. We were not the only ones there that day. We had lunch plans, so we showed up very early. We were the second people to arrive. But you get your little number, and it said number 2. And the couple before us and about 30 something couples after us got a passport and left while we were still sitting there. And the difference is, they were opposite sex couples. And so when a man and a woman go to the window and they have a marriage certificate and a birth certificate, they say, thank you for coming. Here's your passport. Have a great day. But when it's 2 men who come to the window, they're like, well, we have a lot of questions for you. You can't both be the parents.
So you didn't get the passport that day, correct?
Mm-mm.
Correct.
So what'd you do next?
We really struggled. We asked the person at the window, what are we supposed to do? And they're like, well, we'll give you a letter letting you know that we decided she's not a citizen, and you can call a lawyer and figure out how to get home, if you can get home. Because essentially at that point, we're both citizens. We have passports, but at that point, our daughter is someone who doesn't have status here, right? And that's it sounds very dramatic the way I'm going to say it, but it is true. You're trying to get someone illegally across the border. So we went home.
So just to the point of clarification, was she born in the United States or was she born in the UK?
She was born in the UK.
Okay, but was she allowed to go to the United States and then you had to go back? How did that...
Yeah, so previously, before this happened, we brought her in on a tourist visa.
Okay.
Which was not a problem.
Okay.
Our concern, once we went to the State Department and got that decision, was at that point, she was on record as someone who had applied for citizenship and been denied. And we couldn't get a straight answer from the government what record of that was in the system. When you leave the country and come back, you go to the station and they have that computer there and they're looking at something. We have no idea what they're looking at. They could be looking at YouTube or they could be looking at your immigration record. You have no idea, but we were...
It's not accidental, just to be very clear. That entire approach is meant to intimidate.
They take your passport and then they read the computer and you're like, what are they reading about me? And they stare at it for 5 minutes, right? So we didn't know. And we asked the people, they're like, well, when we get to the border to try to go home, will they have a record that she's been denied citizenship? And they said, we don't know. You need to call a lawyer and have a great day.
And she was coming in on a tourist visa. The visa is intended for tourists.
The
man is not a tourist.
Yeah.
she's a citizen and she's coming to live here with her parents. So
right.
it was the wrong thing wrong document for her to come in on.
It's a weird document because you basically have to attest that you're not coming to try to work and you're not coming to do any sort of business, or you're only coming for pleasure and you won't stay longer than 90 days. So Simone had to attest that she was not here for business and she was only going to have fun, which I guess is true.
6 months. Well, and the thing is that once you've done that, you've established some precedent. It could look legally like you accepted that status, and that would work against you in the future potentially.
It also is it felt wrong. Johnny and I are really annoying people. We're very type A and OCD. So we're those people that agonize over the forms when they're at the doctor, have you ever had a racing heart? We're like, yes, we've had it. we just really take questions very seriously. So for us to like sort of describe as a tourist felt awkward, but we were able to get her into the country on that tourist visa in April 2019. And at that point, a clock began. And we made a decision, after receiving lots of advice, we made the decision to let that clock run out and let her overstay her visa and then become undocumented. But, as you know from the news, once you overstay a visa, then you're in a dangerous position, right? Because you've come here, the government's given you a certain amount of time to be here, and you've ignored that and stayed. And so anytime you leave the country and try to come back, you're going to have more problems because then you're a visa abuser. So once we came here and got her in on a tourist visa, overstayed, we were pretty much stuck in the United States until we found a solution.
So when you went back to get her documentation, did you go back with her, or did you leave her stateside while you went to do that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've never been away from her.
Yeah, I mean, when we went back, we had zero idea that this could even be an issue. We fully expected to be coming back with Simone and her passport. So
right. So they deny the passport. So they deny the passport, and you're stuck, right? Like you can't can't do anything.
That's exactly right. We were stuck. We felt stuck. So I mean, the first thing we kind of had to reckon with is that we didn't know how to all get back home as a family together. We didn't have a map of the world that would give us a path back home safely, securely, with certainty. So when we were sort of like preparing for that flight back to the US, we were making all these contingency plans. What happens if we get stopped here, at any point along the route, if we have to get split up, if some of us have to turn around to make sure that, we're with Simone while Simone isn't allowed in the country. It's crazy. But
we'll put it this way. We packed about 30 to 40 hours worth of formula for that.
Just in case.
Because we had to be prepared to basically be stopped and withheld and make a decision. And we didn't want to have to make a decision on the fly. So we went ahead and decided that if we were stopped at any point, that Johnny would continue back to Atlanta, here home, and that Simone and I would remain in the UK. And the reason we had decided that is because Johnny couldn't work remotely. He had a medical issue. He had a lot of, important medical appointments to attend. And it would, be somewhat possible for Simone and I to get an apartment and live in London as long as we had to.
And then I could come join them if I had to, if it was an extended stay.
So how long did you have to? I mean, how long did you have to?
We didn't have to, thank God. We got across the border on that tourist visa.
Okay.
It was really dramatic. I mean, just anecdotally, I'll tell you. I mean, the flight was any flight with how old is Simone at that time? She was 9 months.
Right.
So any cross, transatlantic flight with a 9-month-old is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
This was especially stressful. Because we didn't know once we got there if we were going to be turned around. I mean, it was either going to be a 10-hour flight or it was going to be a 20-hour flight, both ways. So it was really scary. And going into the country and crossing the border was terrifying. My heart was beating out of my chest. And we actually went through the automated system. We got the paperwork, and then we just had to walk what seemed like 5 miles. And then we got to this, place where there was this person standing at a podium taking the printout that you get from the automated system. And my heart was beating out of my chest, and he was eating from a bag of Chick-fil-A, and he just took our paper and didn't even look at us. And so once we walked across the border into where you get your luggage, I was just like, it was so anticlimactic. But, we had to be prepared.
Anyone with kids will know that a 9-month-old picks up on that. Like the kids pick up on that. They'll pick up on the stress. So the fact that you both are stressed and you both are as calm as you're trying to present yourself, definitely freaking out on the inside. Your baby also, knew that. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine what that would be like. And when you're walking through the bowels of Hartsfield Jackson, which is, you're right, you basically land in Macon and then walk to Atlanta without having an answer. The entire, kudos to y'all for not passing out when you got across the border.
Johnny's a pro at being really, really, really calm. So I have to give him credit for that. I'm sort of the emotional driver in our relationship, and he's the very calm person. So I think he held it together for us.
Yeah, I don't present a lot of emotion.
There was a person on the plane. I'll never.
How
forget.
British of you.
Right.
There was a person on the plane on that flight that was sitting in front of us, and Simone couldn't stop grabbing at the TV on the screen in front of us. We fly in the cheap seats, and this woman turned around and she was like, "Your child is really bothering me," or something. And I just remember being like, "Not this flight, just not now. Don't do this now." Like, I don't think I just looked at her and shook my head and was like, "Just not now." Yeah, no.
What's funny, I remember being the 22-year-old in like D-class economy at the far back of the plane next to the toilets with screaming kids all around me and being like, oh my God, I'm never having children. And now I have 4, and we've done a bunch of international travel with them from little on. And now when I am on a plane and there is a parent with a screaming child, your heart opens. You're just like, I'm so sorry for you. Like, what can I do to help you?
Most people are that way.
Yeah.
This particular woman, I'm pretty sure she was like a 22-year-old Instagram influencer.
Lovely.
Yeah, so.
That says everything we need to know about her.
All right. So let's keep the story moving. So you get her back. You got through all that. You got her home. What happened next?
So then we have to figure out a long-term solution for how she can remain in the country. And so we thankfully received communications from Land Legal, from Immigration Equality, and from a big law firm called Morgan Lewis that actually has an office here in Atlanta. And they served as pro bono counsel for us, and we filed a lawsuit against the State Department in July 2019, seeking primarily, it was a complicated lawsuit, it sought a lot of things, but primarily what it sought was a statement that Simone was a citizen since she was born, and a passport.
And what was their defense? What was their reason for not giving her a passport?
So, statutes are what is passed by Congress. That's the law. And the statute, I'm not going to quote it exactly right, but very nearly verbatim, says that if a child is born abroad, has 2 parents who are married, one of which is a citizen, the child is a citizen. The government, look, you just want my honest opinion. They don't like issuing passports to children of gay couples who had children through surrogacy. It sounds weird to them. Gay people aren't really who they're trying to make happy. Sounds complicated, sounds hard, goodbye. This particular administration, in my personal opinion, just, doesn't like handing out passports, and they try to find a way not to. And so they became very focused on this language that says born of parents. And so their argument was that captured in that language is a requirement that parents are biologically related to their children. Not one of them, but both of them. And according to them, it's been that way since the beginning of time, and it always will be. Humorously, the government lawyer at one hearing made the argument that, I forget exactly which, do you remember which character?
Henry VIII's son.
He was like, throughout history. So if someone were to say that Edward is the son of Henry VIII, everyone would know that he was biologically connected to both of us. And I'm like, really? That's your example? I'm not sure that's your strongest example of where you can assume.
You're trying to quote Shakespeare. You're already no. So there's 1,000 flaws in that, right? Like if my wife and I divorce while she's pregnant and I'm married to someone else, and we're now legally married, but it is to the stepmother of this child, there'd be no question about it.
There'd be no question.
There'd be no question. And so they're trying to apply this. Anyway,
so
it's good you won.
Really,
let's let George weigh in. George has been quiet.
I have. So I am curious. How much, based on what you were listening to in court, because obviously the arguments are kind of garbage.
Yeah.
How much of this was about them putting up a defense for the sake of doing it, like hoping that the expense of all of this would simply make you go away, as opposed to like, no, they fighting they know they're going to lose, but if it goes to the mat, but they're thinking maybe they'll just be broke and not bother, and this will stop. Or how much of this was about creating delay and obfuscation and just being a pain in the ass, as opposed to a legitimate governmental interest in trying to protect this legal whatever the hell they were doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you need to have a test for that question. I can't. I try to be one of those people who sees both sides of things, and I would love to be fair to the government and try to think of a good rationale for why they spent thousands of hours and hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money basically to fight these. And it's not just us. I mean, there's many other families who are fighting this as well. I can't figure out why it's important to them.
It fundamentally starts with the fact that the only manner in which you could have gotten a passport to begin with was to fly back to London and go through that embassy. I mean, when you were saying, well, that's fair, I push back on that. I don't think that's fair. Like you can afford to go back to London and to engage with that embassy and deal with that kind of stuff. But that's, to George's question, it's 100% of the reason, right? It's 100% of the reason. There is a substantial number, individuals coming across the Mexican border generally can't afford to go through that work. Somebody coming out of Guatemala that has the exact same circumstances as you generally can't afford, right? And so that's what they're hoping. They're not really upset about you, to relatively well-off gentlemen who look right? They're worried about the people coming across the border. They're worried, and it's 100%. It's not accidental. Like it's methodological, I think, which is, I find extremely frustrating. Yeah. And when you pair it with the State Department's policy of, we have had 3 years in a row the largest reduction in access granted to refugees. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between what an immigrant is and what a refugee is. Mm-hmm. People who are fleeing war zones or have vested interest in getting away from where they are and these aren't people coming here to try to take jobs. These are people trying not to die. This State Department has reduced that dramatically 3 years in a row. It is absolutely intentionally and not accidentally cruel.
Yeah, you're right. And it's a really good point. And I'll sort of build on that by saying, so I'm a lawyer. I don't practice law anymore. But when I did practice law, I represented a number of refugees. I represented a gay man, HIV positive man from Jamaica. I represented a man fleeing political persecution from Sri Lanka. Both, trying to come to the United States for safety. And I represented them under the Obama administration. And in both of those cases, I felt like, the court was the court. They were there to make an objective decision. They weren't our friends, but it didn't feel hostile. It felt like if we had the evidence and we had the case, they were there to welcome these people in our country. And that was my experience with immigration. It was always as the lawyer for someone in a vulnerable situation. And then you flash forward a couple of years, and you're right. Johnny and I are very privileged to have educations. We're very privileged to have some money in order to fly to London. But that doesn't mean this administration is not also coming for us as part of a larger net that they're throwing, to keep people out that seem like others. And if we just want to get really down to the brass tacks, there's a lot of people who will never appear on the front page of the New York Times like we did. There's people who will not have pro bono counsel like we did. And that, felt strange at several points in this process, to have the privilege to be able to make a litigation about our daughters being denied citizenship when there are so many people who are quote unquote, illegal in this country and struggling.
Did you was the case structured in such a way that the ruling set precedent?
No. Legally speaking, you can only file this lawsuit to question an agency's decision. And the court has the power to overturn that decision. The court can go further and didn't say they can never do this again, but it requires a lot more. And we weren't ever going to get there, I don't think. So we were very happy to get the decision we got. They granted Simone a passport.
But you do have now a reference case, right? Yeah. Like anyone going through the same circumstance could reference your case and say, what are the differential facts other than this?
Well, here's the bummer. So there's a same-sex couple in California who sued on this a couple years ago, and they won their case before we even started our case. And this administration appealed it. There's another same-sex couple, two other same-sex couples in DC suing in that case. One of them has won. So we were the third couple to win. And the government not only has fought these to the point of losing them, the government is filing appeals in the courts of appeal. So now these children have passports, and the government wasn't happy enough to deny them passport. Now they want to rip them out of their hands.
Yeah.
With appeals.
But so presumably, if you've got a series of cases and they continue to get appealed, eventually one of them is going to end up either in the Supreme Court or rejected to be heard by the Supreme Court, which is the same as the final ruling that will set precedent, wouldn't it? I mean, wouldn't it at some point?
We'll have to see. Yeah. So if everybody's winning in this first level of court, and then then the government's appealing them all, and the appeals are, we think those are good decisions, then it just across all the courts of appeal, you have a unanimous agreement that this law is bad. There's no reason for the Supreme Court to take that up. So what the Supreme Court does is it gets involved when two courts of appeal disagree. So when the Ninth Circuit says this and the 11th Circuit says that.
Just to be clear, if I could go back, because you said that if the courts agree that this law is bad, but it's not even a law; it's like a policy that the State Department has. So it's weaker, frankly, than a law.
Yeah, thanks for correcting me. That's a really important point. The policy is bad. The law is fine.
Yeah.
Well, I find myself. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I find myself thinking about my own sort of family circumstances as we're talking about this. I'm the first generation of an immigrant family, my father's side, everybody's Nigerian, and chain migration, was not some mysterious hypothetical thing. It's how I have 18 aunts and uncles who live in the United States right now.
Good.
Everybody has been very, very careful about making sure that they have kids in the United States, that they're whenever somebody's about to have a kid, they make sure they just happen to be physically present in the United States and then stay there for a while just to make sure all the passport stuff gets sorted out. I don't think people who don't have a whole lot of ties to immigrant families really understand all of the. Your case is an extreme example, but there are a lot of folks that have to jump through crazy hoops just to make sure that somebody can get a Social Security card when they need to. I don't even want to talk about my naming issues. You've been through hell. And I guess the thing I'm trying to get at here is what do we tell other immigrant families who are going to be referring back to this sort of thing? Not that you're an immigrant family, because you're not. You're both native. You're both American citizens and have been since birth. But what do we tell people who are looking at crazy immigration stuff right now? How do we?
Maybe we can
how
say.
Do we keep people?
We can say, "Have you thought about Canada?"
God, I want it.
Y'all think it's a joke. Y'all think it's a joke, but
it's not.
The numbers bear that out, right? The U.S. is less of a destination now, which is precisely the intent of these policies.
Right.
That's what's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I only mention that because I think about going to Canada a lot. Not that they would have my ass, because everybody wants to go to Canada when shit gets bad.
You
But
know, it's cold up there, Alabama, son.
yeah. I know it's cold, but I can dress warm. Or go to Brazil or someplace. But
You don't want to go to Brazil right now. We're in the
No.
same boat that we are.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
they are. Au
um,
compare Canadien. It's just that there aren't any good outs for us. Like, whatever else is going on, if everything really does continue to go to hell in a handbasket in the United States, do you still have an out in London if you need to get out of here and go, yeah, let's just hide out. Like, Boris can't possibly be worse than what's going to happen here.
Yeah.
Actually, Jonathan, if I could ask, do you have dual citizenship? Presumably you would, right? Do you have dual? Yes.
I do,
And so
yeah. I was both British and American from birth.
is Simone able to do the same? I mean, obviously you guys are in the midst of just, happily taking the American citizenship
Right.
at the moment, but is she able to benefit from that as well?
Yeah, so she was born in the UK. She is a British citizen. And then, I mean, the British law has no bearing on the American law. So her status under British law was not relevant to her case when considering her as an American
Of course.
citizen.
Yeah, of course.
She what I think was important to us anyway was where we where we consider home for Simone, and we consider home for Simone to be here in Decatur in America, and we are raising her as somebody who identifies as American, who is American, and so it was really important to us that her legal status represented the way we're raising her, which is as an American.
Yeah, don't take this the wrong way, but America doesn't deserve you. I'm just saying that you're doing a lot more for us than we're doing for you right now. So
it did feel very personal at times for us. I mean, just in response to George's statement. I mean, Johnny tapped me on the shoulder here if I'm speaking out of turn, but our family, our collective family, has a very back and forth relationship with America. I mean, Johnny's mother left America in the 70s, not because she was happy, but because she's a woman from the Bronx who was disillusioned and thought she would do better somewhere else. And Johnny grew up being American, but not being here and having a lot of, ambiguous feelings about what it meant to be American. And we met when he was on holiday in New York. I'm from Mississippi. I'm like a country song, I just grew up on a porch and just wanted to have kids and a dog. And then I fell in love with this guy from, London who is biracial and has these, very ambiguous feelings about America. And when he came here to be with me, we really celebrated our American life and who we are, as a family. And here we are, two guys having a baby, which makes us even more on the fringes. And then we decide to, get out of Manhattan and come down to suburban Atlanta. And that puts us even more on the fringes. And then to be attacked by the State Department really did, make us feel like, is this our country? But what this proves to us, I think, is that the system can work. I'm not going to say it does work because it fails a lot of people, but it can work. We had a really good judge, and it was a judge, I just like to note, was appointed by Trump. But we had a really good judge who really listened, who really saw us as a family, who learned about our case and cared about our child, and made the right decision. And so, not to get too much on my soapbox, I'm not ready to give up on America yet. I think we are America, and I think eventually people like us are going to win.
I'm very touched to hear you say that because
God, I needed to hear that.
Yeah, I don't often think that. I don't. I often think, can I get my family out of here? Can I get my family somewhere else? Because I do feel like, and we're, I have as much privilege as anybody. We are not the target of the Trump administration. We're a heterosexual family, and have a child, and we're white, and we aren't the targets.
You do work for the press.
Yeah, well.
Just to be clear, you are
Yeah,
certainly.
Well, yeah, maybe, but nobody pays attention to what we do. But
Famous last words.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's like-
it bothers me to the extent to which really mean and stupid people have sort of taken control of power. And there are a lot of conservatives that I deeply respect and think are intellectually honest. These aren't those people. These are.
It's not Stephen Miller.
Yeah, it ain't those people. It's the people who were kind of like kicking your lunch tray over in high school. Like those are the people that are in charge now. And I have days where I'm like, do I really want my kid to grow up in this? Like, do I really want my kid to be in a country that just doesn't give a shit about people? Because that's how I feel. Like they don't give a shit about whether I have health care, whether I can get the kid to college, whether I can take care of the kid. I mean, I realize that's my responsibility, but, health care in particular, like, I look at you and I'm like, why wouldn't you just go to England and get the free health care, because we're doing stuff on the private market right now, and it's a nightmare.
We had swimmers there last week, and the eardrops were $260.
Oh, God.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know. We have those moments too.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I mean, man,
You may.
we were both born I was born in 1980. He was born in 1981. I was born in not the best part of Mississippi, and even the best part of Mississippi is not good. When we were growing up, it was pretty much decided that we were going to get HIV and then AIDS and then not be around anymore. And here we are, 39 years old, legally married with a daughter, suing the State Department and winning. And so it does feel really sad some days, and it does feel like we're losing, but we've just learned that you can be 24 years old and half the country could outlaw your relationship. I mean, to make it even, we grew up when we, in 13 states, we could be arrested just for, kissing a guy. And here we are. So I just think you have to keep at it. You have to keep telling people who you are. And people will listen. And if you tell your story enough times, you'll start making more friends. And that's I'm sure I'm certain there are lots of same-sex couples, men specifically in Decatur with kids, but we don't have them as friends. If you're out there, you want to contact us, we'd love to hear from you. But we're unique. We live in a cul-de-sac with all straight people with kids. There are some LGBT people in our neighborhood, but no men that have kids. My point is we're unique, and so we have to tell our story a lot. Our daughter is going to have to tell her story a lot. Even well-intentioned people have really strange questions.
so there's unique, and then there's unique. Because I got to tell you, like, we have come a long way. Whatever else is going on, like the most interesting thing in Decatur for a couple like you is that you were Americans living abroad for a while. Like the fact that you're unique. A gay couple, like the fact that you're a gay couple in Decatur is like meatloaf. I mean, I'm just
going to part of the majority, honestly. But yeah,
I want to know how you found Decatur. Like, you're moving back, you're coming here. Like, did you have family in Decatur or in the area around here? Like, how did you know?
It was through your connections, right?
Yeah. So I grew up in Mississippi. Johnny grew up in London. We met and we lived in New York City. And my mom had lived. I'm just going to give you the truth, right? Because the truth is most interesting. My mom had lived in Decatur. And in 2010, she had a medical issue that required me to come down here a lot from New York. And I was like, okay, I'll move here. I'm going to move to Atlanta. I came every weekend for 10 weeks. I was single at the time. I went to some gay bars. I met a lot of the boys. And I decided with pretty much certainty that I would go back to New York City, find a husband, and then come back. Because I found there just to be a little too much racism, a little too much just stuff I didn't like out there. And I did it, I went and found a husband in New York City. And then when we were starting to have, thoughts about having children in 2017, we thought, where can we go that we can have a high quality of life. You know, we don't have to live in a small place, and we might be different, but not too different. And we looked at places like Nashville and the suburbs of Nashville, and we're like, okay, here we are, a biracial gay couple with a kid. There's not enough.
Pretty different in Nashville,
yeah.
It would, yeah.
So Decatur felt like the right spot, you know, like it was accepting enough. And so we just came down here on a hope, and you know, it's worked out.
Right. And this is like,
oh,
this
sorry,
is
go
kind of
ahead.
like a bit of there's a parallel here, right? Because we felt like we wanted to we didn't mind blazing a bit of a trail, but we didn't want to blaze the trail. We didn't really want to be first.
Right.
So like when this lawsuit came up, we were like, what? We're blazing the trail?
Yeah, right.
No way.
Damn it.
I've never
We didn't
thought of
want
it
to
that
be
way.
in this position.
Yeah.
I have lived in Atlanta long enough to remember that Decatur, I mean, it wasn't even this is pre-gentrification Decatur, but the original white population that moved back into Decatur, if you will, was principally lesbian. Like Decatur was the epicenter where female gay couples moved to, and there was an enormous population that was here, and it influenced the way the nightlife developed, and it influenced that like literally everything in it. Not everything, that's overstating, but a pretty substantial portion of the culture that got laid down in the late 80s and early 90s in Decatur was led from female homosexuals that had moved into this particular area. So it is a little bit why you feel like there's not perhaps a ton of other men that are in the same position that you're in Decatur. There are, however, plenty of women that are in that, you know, in
Yes.
Decatur. Yeah.
You're still, I'll put it this way. There's a group in Decatur, you might be familiar with it, called Dames.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, if you need to know which sunscreen to use, if you need to know what the difference between a mosquito and a spider bite is, or how to do virtual education, you go to Dames. That's where all the great information is. Men can't get in, which I understand the reason. I do. I get it. There needs to be affinity groups. I'm a big fan of affinity groups. It's a little frustrating for us to have to go ask the women down the street which sunscreen to use, because we can't get the information.
So to be completely honest, the same holds true for heterosexual male dads.
Yeah, you want to get
like,
in.
it really is. I also hear through the grapevine, meaning my wife, that Dames is also the place that you can go if you want to get into a flame war and absolutely end up. That's George has got
I'm not interested in
right.
that part.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, to me, Dames is like the Avondale Estates next door. Like, you hear about it all the time, but you don't want to go be a part of it, really. Like, you know, you don't have that much time in your life to devote.
Maybe I'm better just getting information secondhand then.
Yeah, I don't think you're missing much. I hear a lot of
you're missing the right things. Maybe that's the right way to say it.
Although I will say some of my best stories have come out of discussions that have started on that group. You know, people getting together and, you know, just saying whatever the hell comes to mind, and occasionally truth will spill out, and it turns into a story. So I'm glad I have people willing to sift through and curate Dames for me, and give me the best of the best. But I don't know that I'm necessarily missing much by being a part of the fray either. But it's funny you mentioned Dames. That's something my wife is all the time. I'm like, what's going on in Dames? She's like, I'm not going to tell you what's going on in Dames. He's like, you got to figure it out. You got to piece it together.
You're not allowed.
On the street that I check in at least once a week. I'm like, is there anything I'm missing? She's like, okay, here's what you need to know. So
yeah,
you're right. Maybe the curated version is best.
Yeah, I've also been unapproved from Tuckertown Talk, but that's another story for another day. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have been kicked out of that.
Yeah,
for
you're not missing anything.
Totally.
Three-letter acronyms that are all consonants just is a bad starting point. I'll say that.
Tuckertown Talk. Yeah.
TTT.
TTT.
I owe Tucker some stuff right now.
Yeah, so we got about 15 minutes left here. I don't want to keep y'all. I know you got to put your baby to bed and everything else, but do you want to leave us with some parting thoughts about what you learned from your experience?
You want to go?
You go first, and I'll wait a
Okay.
second.
Okay. I think I learned that. So when I started this, I thought that I would be doing the equivalent of dropping off a strongly worded letter to the to the post office. Was not doing that. It was a lot more personally testing, emotional, and difficult than I thought it was going to be. The sort of being under the microscope was a lot tougher for both of us, I think, than we had. Well, certainly that I'd anticipated. You can speak for yourself, but I also learned that the law, when it's done well, is extremely rigorous. Like this process that we went through was very rigorous and lengthy. It was lengthy and it was careful, and it wasn't. I thought there'd be like movie moments along the way. There were no movie moments. It was all very steady and careful, precise thinking certainly from the legal team. They did a great job. And even with all that behind us, I personally still found it scary. I found it terrifying to be in this situation because it wasn't really me on the line. It was Simone, our daughter. But I suppose the lesson was I should have just been brave, and I think I would next time approach it from the spirit of be brave. Don't worry if it's not just a letter that you're dropping off at the post office, even if it's going to be invasive, even if it's going to be hard, even if it's going to be at times really stressful and make you question what you did. Just be brave, stick with it, and try and go with it because it's going to be worth it.
There's no part of any part of the story that you've told us that would make me think you're not brave.
Yeah.
I
Really.
would just say that right now. I am in awe of what you guys went through and want to thank you both from the bottom of my heart. I'm jumping ahead. Sorry. Like I want to hear Derek talk, but
yeah, I second all that. It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, and it was emotionally hard. It was emotionally really hard. There were some really dark days in the process. I think the part that that really strikes me is there was a decision we had to make. You know, Johnny and I could have made the decision to naturalize Simone as an immigrant, as though she came from somewhere else. You know, as a way of keeping her in the country, instead of filing this lawsuit. And we sat down as a family and decided that there's no avoiding having to tell our story for the rest of our lives. You know, we live next to wonderful people, but we are still, you know, on a weekly basis describing what an egg donor is and which one of us is genetically connected, and, you know, hearing comments like, oh, I can tell which one of you is the father. You know, like good people meaning well things, but like Simone's going to get that her whole life. You know, I always think about her going on a date when she's 22 and explaining to the person she's having dinner with how she was created and how she grew up. And so there's no escaping the burden of having to explain us and who we are as a family. There's just no escaping that. And so the idea of not filing the lawsuit and not fighting it felt like the wrong first step. And I'm just so grateful that we won, because it would have been really hard to explain to Simone that you have to go out there and you have to be brave and you have to tell your story, and you might still lose, but you have to tell it anyway. At least now we can tell her, if you tell it and you can get people to listen, and thank God we're privileged enough to have good lawyers, you can win. And so it just seems like the right start for her time in the country.
Well, God bless you both, and God bless your little girl. She's beautiful. She's going to be hell on wheels in about a year, so good luck with that.
I'm glad this is behind you now,
Yeah.
because
So screwed.
Good luck with
all
that.
the stress that you felt before,
Yeah.
it's about to.
But this was a great episode of the Decaturish Twitch Show. We're going to upload it to YouTube and Facebook later. If you are just joining us, we are wrapping up our discussion for this week. We thank our guests so much for joining us. This Friday, we are going to have a special Twitch show. It's going to feature just music. by the four-man string band. We don't know how that's going to work because we've never done live music, but we're going to figure it out. So it'll be a fun experiment, and I kind of wanted to start Labor Day weekend with something fun since we're not going to get to do Dragon Con or any of that other cool Labor Day stuff you get to do in Atlanta. So I hope you'll join us. Next Wednesday at 6, we are tentatively going to have a discussion with some parents who want DeKalb County to go ahead and open up the schools for an in-person learning option. We're trying to line up all the panelists for that, so I hope you'll join us for that. We are here every Friday and Wednesday at 6 o'clock on the Decaturish Twitch channel. Please join us this Friday, and have a good evening, and we'll talk to everyone again soon.